All right, so thanks so much for doing this. My first question that I have for you is tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you started in the art world.
Sure. So my name's Nicole Monahan, and I own Monahan Studio out here in the Pacific Northwest in Woodinville. And I, right now, I teach in my studio. I teach in various places around the community. I teach at Bellevue College. I go take people on global retreats around the world, and we have fun and learn, do some art. We just got back from Kenya, which was super fun, and drew all the animals there. And so, aside from teaching, I am an illustrator, and my art lends itself more towards children's illustrations. So, illustrating for children's books or music album covers or packaging. And I do all of that on a freelance basis. So, most everything is custom for whatever my client needs. Um, and um, so for those, I can do illustrations for people anywhere. But sometimes I get the opportunity to do things for people in my community. And so, for example, um, one that I did last year, I think it was last year, in my community was for a children's home that they do, it's for medically fragile children. And so the idea for my client was to have a book that she could give to her clientele, prospective clientele, um, who are families of these kids. And so they're transitioning from the hospital um, into a home, and but they still need a lot of medical care. So she wanted something to show them that it's more of a home and it's fun and friendly. And so I got to go, um, tour the home and meet the kids and be able to see, what they're doing and see their personalities so that I can incorporate that into the book, which was really special to be able to do that you can't do when you're dealing with somebody that's somewhere else in the world. But that's the bulk of what I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like what I was gonna ask is what drew you into doing illustration? Did it happen at like a young age, or when did that sort of take off?
Well, so I've always been interested in art. I've always loved art and drawn a lot. When I was a kid, I drew, and I probably built more than I drew. I built a lot of Legos. My dad was a woodworker, and so I'd help him in the wood shop. Um, and my mom owned a bookstore, so I spent a lot of time looking at children's books. And um, so when I went to college, I went to school for industrial design, which is creating things, products, because I like that building side of art. And when I got out, I got into architecture. Um, and then when the economy got bad in 2008, I switched out of that. I had a art gallery, and then I had a big move, and I ended up in illustration because I kind of went back to that, sitting in my mom's bookstore looking at all those books, and just having the narrative with the art was really interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. Now, on that point, how do you sort of really combine the narrative with the art? In other words, like what's your process like when it comes to like illustrating for children's books and stuff like that?
So I'll have a manuscript come across my table, and I'll look at it and make sure it's something that I feel inspired to draw. So for me, that's doing anything with nature or stories that just kind of have a feel good story to them, things that are well written. Um, uh, Anything that has an environmental impact is really interesting for me. And so I'll look at the illustration or the manuscript, and I'll kind of write little notes because as I read, I'm very visual. So as I read, I think of these images in my head and I just write little notes down of what comes to mind. And I write it in the margins of the manuscript. And then I'll go to a paper or to a blank piece of paper and I'll do little thumbnail sketches, which thumbnail sketches, I don't have any to show you, but they're just little. They're like, maybe the size of your hand or smaller. And it's just, no one would know what's there except for me. It's just chicken scratch, just little shapes, but it helps me lay out kind of the flow of my ideas because when you're doing children's books, you need to think about um, to draw your reader across all the pages to keep them turning pages and reading the story. And I like to hide little nuggets here and there. So, like I did a book one time where the um, character in it had this little teddy bear with her the entire way through, which wasn't in the manuscript, but it's just fun to add. Or like I did one this year that the reading the manuscript, there wasn't really a certain character in it, but I made the character a little kitten. And so, which that was fun. And then on one page, there was a little nugget to clue you in on what's the next page after that. Um, I think I got off on a little bit of a tangent, but that's kind of my process. So um, after I do the thumbnails, then I draw out the sketches and talk with the client, make any corrections or changes, and then I do the color and then scan it in and format it and send it off to the publisher.
Mm-hmm. So, my next question is, like what, because obviously, like, making sketches for like books and stuff takes time. So what I'm getting at is what is the easiest sketch you've ever done and which one might have been the hardest? Like you just haven't quite figured out, that you needed some fine tuning.
Yeah. So I think that answer is not what people usually think because a lot of times people think, oh, the simple things that are easy to do are just like you know, a bear standing holding a balloon because there's not much to it. And a complicated one would be a bear in a forest with all these animals. And for me, it's not really that because sometimes the really simple things are hard to do because you really have to make sure that they're standing just right and that they've got just the right expression on their face. Um, for me, what's hard is doing something that's not inspiring to me. So if somebody, I'm trying to think of something that would not be inspiring. Well, I'll just tell you what is inspiring to me. So if I'm reading something and I love animals and plants. And so if animals and plants are interacting with each other and there's um, good descriptors and it's just a fun story, or if there's a lot of heart behind it, that really helps the images create in my mind a lot more rather than if it's like a kid going to a birthday party and um, he stubs his toe. I don't know that that wouldn't be as quite as inspirational to me. And so that would be harder just because I wouldn't be that interested in drawing it.
Yeah. So, like my next question is, I don't know if you teach, other people like how to do illustrations, but if you did, what would be your like steps to like figuring out how to create the best illustration? What are some tips, strategies, ideas that you help people who want to create illustrations for a children's book or whatever they want to create?
Yeah. So I think the first thing, I see a lot of people wanting to learn how to illustrate books, particularly because a lot of people write a book and then they want to illustrate it themselves and maybe they have no experience in drawing. And so my first tip is just practice every day. Set aside a certain time of day, even if it's 5 minutes, just to draw anything, even if it's drawing your breakfast. Just getting in the habit of drawing and observing what's out there in the world and taking some less basic drawing lessons. Um, Once you kind of get that under your belt and you're flowing along, then you have to learn how to take a narrative or a story and turn that into pictures. And so that is more of learning the creativity side of it, and maybe jotting down um, character traits of your character, figuring out who your character is before you jump into the storyline, so that you can, if your character, um, thinking of the emotional traits of the character and also the physical traits, and that will help you. There's so much that goes into illustrating picture books. It's hard to list everything, but that's a good way to start. Um, and I do teach people how to do that. It's not a quick process. It's something that takes time and practice.
Yeah,
So
so like it's kind of like making a movie, right? You have to figure out what are the main characters, what's the plot, what's sort of the idea, stuff like that.
exactly. It's a lot like doing a movie. And I years ago I took a course where we watched a movie and we had to do quick thumbnail sketches along the whole movie because it helps you figure out scenes, right? If you think about a movie, nowadays there's a lot going on and you're looking from different perspectives. You're like looking down and then you're looking really close and then you're looking from this side and looking from that side. And so that's a good thing to incorporate into your books too, just to keep things interesting and keeping people wanting to turn the page.
Yeah. Just to kind of wrap this up, like what can other people take away from this conversation? In other words, how can, really art, creating illustrations help really sort of um how can they help really create that sort of how can it sort of branch out their imagination? How can it sort of make them more curious, make them want to sort of say, hey, this is something that I envision, this is something that I think about that I think about for this story. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think like brainstorming is so important, and because it helps open up your mind to thinking of new ideas, and it kind of snowballs, right? So a good thing to do is, if you're either a visual or if you think in words better, is to first jot down, write down things that you do know about it, and just have either write them out or sketch them out, and that kind of gets your brain moving in that direction. And once you start doing that, you'll start thinking about things that you hadn't really thought of before. Maybe if the stories about an elephant and you wrote down elephant, and that the elephant gets lost. So you write down elephant gets lost, and then you think, okay, so how did the elephant feel before he got lost? And you write down happy, he was tromping through the woods. And then how did the elephant feel when he found out he was lost? And then you write that down. And just going through this process of, what was before, during, after, how does he feel, where is he at, everything that comes to mind, just write that down. Then it helps your brain start putting it all in a framework like a movie, and it just snowballs into more and more.
Mm-hmm. All right.